The story is about Hunter Biden's laptop containing not just illicit photos of him doing drugs and God knows what with prostitutes of undetermined ages, but also emails showing him and his father's corrupt business ties to China are all true. So the liberal media lied about it and big tech censored it, blocking links to the story and suspending the New York Post, claiming it was all just Russian disinformation, when in reality the mainstream media was spreading the disinformation, trying to cover up the truth. But this wasn't the first time imaginary Russians were blamed for spreading fake news. Remember back to the beginning of the fake news hoax after Hillary Clinton lost the 2016 election to Donald Trump? At first, they blamed teenagers in Macedonia for spreading fake news about Hillary, which Democrats say convinced people not to vote for her. And then they blamed racist alt-right Trump supporters on the internet for spreading hate about Hillary. Then they settled on the grand unifying conspiracy theory that Russian bots in collusion with the Kremlin were behind all the fake news that was being posted on Facebook about Hillary in order to supposedly help Donald Trump win. It's important to point out that the Washington Post first tried to link Russia to internet news outlets whose articles had widely circulated online. Their supposed evidence for this was a new group of experts called Prop or Not, Propaganda or Not, who nobody had ever heard of before and whose members were anonymous. What a surprise. Do you remember this story? The Washington Post didn't even mention what these supposed experts' credentials were. They just claimed that this unknown group were experts who had discovered a Russian propaganda campaign was being amplified by a list of websites and YouTube channels that they had compiled. This story, with the headline, "Russian Propaganda Effort Helped Spread Fake News During Election, Experts Say," dumped gallons of gasoline on a small little fire, which then exploded into the fake news phenomena. Other news outlets quickly denounced the Washington Post story and their newfound supposed experts, prop or not, as McCarthyism. Even Rolling Stone, which had previously hyped up concerns about fake news, called their story shameful and disgusting. Some of the sites prop or not listed as publishers of Russian propaganda threatened to sue the Washington Post for defamation if they didn't issue a retraction and an apology. And after the backlash kept growing, they did. The New Yorker would later write that Prop or Not's report on which sites were supposedly spreading Russian propaganda was a mess, and their reporter later interviewed a guy named Elliot Hitchens, a researcher who had investigated Russian fake news stories online for years, who told him point blank that, quote, "To Prop or Not, simply exhibiting a pattern of beliefs outside the political mainstream is enough to risk being labeled a Russian propagandist." The Intercept, an online outlet run by Glenn Greenwald at the time, who broke the story about Edward Snowden a few years earlier, slammed Prop or Not, saying that, quote, "The individuals behind this newly created group are publicly branding journalists and news outlets as tools of Russian propaganda, even calling on the FBI to investigate them for espionage, while cowardly hiding their own identities. The group promoted by the Washington Post thus embodies the toxic essence of Joseph McCarthy, but without the courage to attach individual names to the blacklist." With this sudden concern about fake news affecting the 2016 election, various studies were conducted which actually proved that fake news did not swing the election or have any measurable effect whatsoever on how people voted. New York University and Stanford reported that only 8% of people were actually duped by fake news. And of those 8% who supposedly believed some fake news article was real, it's highly unlikely that those stories actually swayed their opinions about a candidate and instead only reflected what they had already believed. Columbia Journal Review conducted a study and found that the fake news audience is real, but said it's also really small. And they pointed out that the fake news audience, as they called it, doesn't exist in a filter bubble, and that visitors to fake news websites visited real news sites just as often as visitors to real news sites visited other real news sites. And in fact, sometimes the fake news audience visited real news sites more often. They even asked if fake news was a fake problem, and they concluded their report saying that their findings call into question the scope of this supposed problem at all. Of course, that was before the mainstream media abandoned all ethics and became the biggest producers of fake news. The studies into fake news after the 2016 election found that most voters got their news from TV and actual news websites, not from some random stories posted on unknown websites and shared on Facebook. Quote, "Our data suggests that social media were not the most important source source of election news, and even the most widely circulated news stories were seen only by a small fraction of Americans, the researchers at Columbia Journal-Review said. Even Mark Zuckerberg admitted that, quote, to think it influenced the election in any way is a pretty crazy idea. He surprisingly confirmed what rational people understood, that Hillary Clinton supporters underestimated the amount of support for Donald Trump, saying, quote, I do think there is a certain profound lack of empathy in asserting that the only reason someone could have voted the way that they did is they saw some fake news. If you believe that, then I don't think that you have internalized the message Trump supporters are trying to send in this election. Even MSNBC's Joe Scarborough, a rhino Republican who hates Donald Trump, admitted this.
When you look at this with fake news and you see what happened up at Harvard and you hear everybody writing articles saying millennials caused Hillary Clinton the election and dogs with 3 legs caused Hillary Clinton the election, and comets passing in the night. Hillary Clinton caused Hillary Clinton the election. If you care about Democrats digging out of the hole that they have put themselves in now,
I do.
You've got to ask yourself, what have Democrats done to so offend Americans that they only have 11 governorships, that they've lost control of the Senate, they've lost control of the House, they lost 900 legislative seats over the past 6 years.
He concluded it wasn't fake news, it was something much bigger. Mika Brzezinski sighed and said that she didn't think people were ready to hear that. Of course, they weren't. Liberals were sinking deeper into a depression, unable to handle the reality that Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton on election night and would soon be sworn in as our next president. And then every day they continued to lose their grip on reality. Once the political establishment realized that they could use the ruse of fake news to censor hundreds of millions of ordinary users on social media, while at the same time partnering with the Silicon Valley tech titans to have their algorithms artificially boost mainstream media content to the top search results and in people's news feeds and in the trending topics list, the information war went supernova. Of course, as is always the case, the mainstream media is guilty of the very thing that they accuse others of doing. They are the largest producers and distributors of fake news. They are inciting violence. They are spewing racism, anti-whiteism, with every breath. There's so much more to this story, and the power of this new unholy alliance between big tech and the mainstream media is unlike anything ever in the history of mass media. And it's critically important that everyone understand how and why social media went from a tool that ordinary people used to circumvent the mainstream media to it becoming the mainstream media. So order my book, The True Story of Fake News: How Mainstream Media Manipulates Millions, in paperback from Amazon.com, or download the ebook from any of the major ebook stores. It's a lot more detailed than I can get into here on my videos, and if you enjoy my in-depth reports like this, you'll really love my book. So head on over to Amazon.com or click the link in the description below and check them out.